December doesn't ask permission in northern cities. It takes. Takes warmth from the air until every breath burns cold in your lungs. Takes color from the world until everything exists in shades of gray and white and the deep blue-black of early winter nights. Takes the last stubborn leaves from trees that should have surrendered weeks ago, leaving behind skeletal branches that claw at the sky like hands reaching for something they'll never touch again. That Christmas Eve December was taking everything it could from the night, leaving behind only cold and the kind of darkness that makes 11:47 p.m. feel like the end of the world. Cameron Brooks stepped into that darkness like he did every night. Same jacket, same keys, jingling their lonely song against his hip, same route to his car, parked in the back corner of the apartment complex lot. 3 years of the same everything because routine was the only thing keeping him upright. Routine didn't ask questions. Routine didn't expect answers. Routine didn't care that the man performing it had died inside long ago and was just going through the motions of living, because stopping seemed like too much effort. The wind hit him like a physical force, cutting through his heavy coat and finding every gap, every exposed inch of skin. Cameron pulled the collar up and hunched his shoulders, but the chill had already worked its way in some, settling somewhere deep where warmth used to live. His breath formed ghosts in the air. Small white clouds that appeared and disappeared in seconds. Fitting, he thought. Everything disappears eventually. The parking lot spread out before him, a field of snow-dusted cars and frozen asphalt. Security lights cast orange pools of illumination that made the darkness between them seem even darker. Cam's boots crunched through the thin layer of ice that had formed over yesterday's slush, each step a small violence against the silence. He was halfway to his car when movement caught his eye. Something near the dumpsters. A small shape, darker than the shadows, moving with deliberate slowness. Cam's feet stopped before his mind could process what he was seeing. His hand still gripped his keys, metal cold enough to burn against his palm. The logical part of his brain, the part that had learned to protect itself by not getting involved, screamed at him to keep walking, to get in his car, to drive to work, to maintain the careful distance he'd built between himself and the rest of humanity. But some instincts are older than grief, stronger than self-preservation, deeper than the walls we build around our hearts. The shape moved again, and this time Cam's eyes focused properly. His breath caught in his throat, sharp and painful. It was a child. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, was methodically searching through the garbage with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before, many times before. Her thin fingers, red and trembling from the cold, picked through empty food containers and crumpled papers with a precision that made Cam's stomach turn. She wasn't frantically digging. She was hunting, sorting, evaluating each piece of trash with the careful consideration of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and couldn't afford to miss it. Cam's feet carried him forward. He didn't decide to move. His body simply refused to stay still. "Hey there," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. The girl's head snapped up like a deer sensing a predator. Her eyes went wide, enormous dark pools in her small, pale face, filled with a terror so pure and primal that Cam felt it like a blow to his chest. She clutched something against her body, a partially eaten sandwich wrapped in torn plastic, and her whole frame tensed to run. "It's okay," Cam said, raising his hand slowly, palms out showing he held nothing. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl remained frozen, every muscle locked in fight or flight mode. But she didn't run. Not yet. She studied his face with the weariness of someone much older than her years, eyes tracking his every micro-movement, calculating risks and escape routes. Survival math that no child should have to know. Up close, Cam could see more details that made his heart crack further with each observation. The purple jacket that hung on her like borrowed wings that had forgotten how to fly, frayed at the cuffs where small hands had pulled the sleeves down for warmth too many times. The fabric once bright as summer lilacs had faded to the color of old bruises, zipper teeth missing in places like a gap-toothed smile that had given up on joy. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her pale, hollow cheeks, and her lips had taken on a faint blue tinge that spoke of hours in the cold. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Cam asked gently, lowering himself slowly to one knee so he wouldn't tower over her. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic on the highway and the whistle of wind through the apartment complex. Cam waited patient as stone, letting her take all the time she needed to decide if he was safe. After what felt like forever, she whispered, "Melody." The word came out barely louder than the wind, but Cam heard it clear as church bells. "Melody," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "That's a beautiful name, like the gemstone, precious and rare." Confusion flickered across the girl's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. No one had called her precious before. The word didn't fit into her understanding of the world or her place in it. "I'm Cameron," he continued, his voice as gentle as he could make it without it breaking. "Most people call me Cam." Melody's grip on the sandwich tightened, her small knuckles going white. She glanced between Cam and the dumpster, clearly torn between the desperate need for food and the very real fear of this stranger. "Are you looking for something specific?" Cam asked, though he knew the answer. Needed to hear it anyway. Needed her to say it so he could fully understand the depth of what he was seeing. Melody's bottom lip trembled. Not with cold, though she was clearly freezing. With the weight of having to speak a truth too heavy for a 7-year-old to carry. Food. One word, 4 letters. A universe of meaning compressed into a single syllable that hit Cam like a fist wrapped in ice. The word settled in the cold December air between them, visible almost like it had substance and weight. No child should be searching for food in a dumpster. Not on Christmas Eve. Not in America. Not anywhere. Not ever. Cam's hands clenched at his sides, not in anger at her, but at whatever circumstances had brought her to this moment. At every adult who had failed her. At a world that could let this happen. "Where are your parents, Melody?" The question landed like a stone thrown into dark water, and Cam watched the ripples of pain spread across her small face. She went very still, the kind of still that children only learn from surviving things that should never touch them. Her shoulders drew in, making her even smaller, as if she could shrink enough to disappear entirely. Her bottom lip trembled harder now, and not just from the cold, from the weight of a truth too terrible to speak but too present to deny. I don't have any." Her voice didn't crack. It shattered. Broke into pieces right there in the frozen air between them, and Cam felt each shard lodge somewhere in his chest, because he knew that sound. He knew what it meant when your voice broke on the truth you didn't want to be true. He knew what it was like to speak words that made your new reality real, undeniable, permanent. Something shifted in Cam's chest, then, not a twist, but a crack, the sound ice makes when spring finally arrives and frozen rivers remember how to move. It was pain, yes, but it was also the first feeling he'd allowed himself in 3 years. The first time his heart had dared to beat for someone else since the day it shattered. The December wind picked up swirling snow that had begun to fall in the last few minutes. Small flakes caught in Melody's tangled hair, like stars that had lost their way and settled for Earth. She shivered, a full-body tremor that started at her shoulders and worked its way down to her feet in shoes that Cam now noticed were too thin, too worn, held together with duct tape that had gone grey with dirt and age. "Can you tell me what happened?" Cam asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile trust was building between them. Melody looked at the sandwich in her hands at the corner, turning green with mold at the plastic wrap, torn and dirty. Then she looked back at Cam, and something in his eyes must have convinced her that maybe, just maybe, this one adult might listen, might care, might not walk away. The words came faster then, like water from a dam that had cracked wide open. I was living with my Grandma Ruth. She was all I had after. Her voice caught. After my mama left when I was a baby. I don't remember her at all. Mama, I mean. Grandma Ruth said she wasn't ready to be a mother, that some people aren't meant to stay, and that it's okay, because Grandma was enough love for both of them. Cam's throat tightened. This child had learned philosophical acceptance of abandonment before she'd learned to tie her shoes. Ruth got sick 3 weeks ago. Melody continued her words, tumbling over each other now, as if speaking them quickly might make them hurt less. She had this cough that wouldn't go away, and she was so tired all the time. We didn't have money for the doctor, so she just kept taking medicine from the store, the kind in the purple box that she said would make her better. The little girl wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve, a gesture so innocent and childlike that it broke through Cam's carefully constructed emotional armor like it was made of paper. One morning, Melody's voice went quieter, smaller. I tried to wake her up for breakfast. We always had breakfast together, even when we only had crackers and butter, because the food stamps hadn't come yet. But that morning she wouldn't open her eyes. I shook her shoulder and called her name. I said, "Grandma Ruth, wake up, it's time for breakfast, and I even made your tea the way you like it." Tears began streaming down Melody's face, cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. But she wouldn't wake up. Her skin was so cold, colder than now even. And I knew she was gone like Mama, but this time forever. Not just gone away gone, but gone. Cam felt tears burning behind his own eyes. He knew that feeling, the desperate shaking, the denial, the moment when reality crashes down and changes everything. He'd shaken Eleanor's shoulder in that hospital room, even after the doctors had told him she was gone, as if his refusal to accept it could somehow reverse death itself. What happened then, he managed to ask, though his voice came out rough as gravel. Melody wiped at her tears with frozen fingers. The people in uniforms came. Ambulance people, then police, then other people with papers and clipboards. They took Grandma Ruth away, and they took me to a building with lots of offices and fluorescent lights that buzzed all the time. They said I had to go live with new families. Her voice broke completely now, and the tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over in earnest. But none of them wanted me to stay. The first family had 3 kids already, and I heard them tell the social worker I was too quiet, too sad that I made their kids depressed. The second family seemed nice at first, but they kept comparing me to their daughter, who died, and I think it hurt them too much to look at me. Jesus, Cam thought, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. This child had been bounced around like she was nothing more than an inconvenient problem to solve. The third family. Melody's voice went flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they're describing something too painful to feel. They didn't care about me. They just wanted the money the state gives for foster kids. I slept in a room with their storage boxes, and they gave me food only once a day, always leftovers they didn't want. And they were always angry, always yelling. "So what did you do?" Cam asked, though he was beginning to understand, beginning to piece together how this brave little girl had ended up searching through trash on Christmas Eve. "I left," Melody said simply. "I walked here. Took me most of a day, but I know the way because Grandma and I used to live in that building over there before we had to move to the smaller place across town." I thought maybe. Her voice grew impossibly small. "Maybe if I came back to our old neighborhood, Grandma Ruth might come home too." Like maybe it was all a bad dream, and if I just came back to the right place, everything would be okay again. The magical thinking of a desperate child, the hope that defied logic because hope was all she had left. How long have you been out here, Melody? 2 days. 2 days. The words hung in the frozen air like an accusation. A 7-year-old child had been surviving on her own for 2 days in December, whether sleeping in a basement, eating garbage, and no one had noticed. No one had stopped. No one had cared. Until now. Cam pulled out his phone and checked the time. 12:03 a.m. The date had changed. It was officially Christmas Day. Melody, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't quite name, but felt in every cell of his body. I want you to listen to me very carefully. The girl looked up at him, her face a portrait of exhaustion and resignation, and the smallest flicker of something that might have been hope, if hope hadn't been beaten out of her too many times already. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Confusion flickered across Melody's face, quickly followed by suspicion. Adults had made promises to her before. Every single one had been broken. Why should this stranger be any different? I know you don't know me, Cam continued, choosing his words carefully, weighing each one like it mattered because it did. And I know you probably don't trust grown-ups very much right now. I wouldn't either if I were you, but I promise you this. His voice cracked, and he had to clear his throat and start again. I am not going anywhere. Something in his voice, maybe the raw honesty, maybe the way his own pain reflected in his eyes like a mirror made Melody's shoulders relax just slightly. Just enough. How about we start by getting you somewhere warm, Cam asked, and getting some real food in you? Not. He gestured to the moldy sandwich she still clutched. Not this. Real food. Hot food. As much as you want. Melody hesitated, torn between desperation and the survival instinct that told her not to trust strangers. Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her head. Surely all the things good parents and grandparents tell children about not going with people they don't know. But the cold was seeping through her thin jacket, reaching all the way to her bones. And the sandwich in her hands was moldy on one corner, and her stomach hurt from being empty for so long, and she was so tired of being alone. She nodded a tiny movement of her head that held the weight of surrender and trust and terrified hope all at once. Okay, Cam said, and he felt something unlock in his chest. Come on then. My apartment is right over there. Building C, 3rd floor. He stood slowly, giving her time to change her mind, time to run if she needed to. But Melody stood too, wobbling slightly as circulation returned to legs that had been crouched too long. Can I? She hesitated. Can I bring my backpack? Of course, Cam said, and watched as she retrieved a small child's backpack from behind the dumpster, purple like her jacket, stuffed full with what must have been everything she owned. The backpack looked like it weighed almost as much as she did. They walked across the parking lot, Melody maintaining a distance of about 5 feet, ready to run if this turned out to be a trap. Cam moved slowly, deliberately, giving her space and time. The snow fell harder now. Fat flakes that caught in their hair and melted on their shoulders. The apartment building loomed ahead, 3 stories of brick and vinyl siding, peeling paint and rusted railings. Not much, but it was shelter. It was warm. It was something. They took the elevator and Cam watched Melody press herself into the corner eyes on the doors, calculating escape routes even here. He kept his distance hands visible, posture non-threatening. Small gestures that most people wouldn't think about, but that meant everything to a traumatized child. 3rd floor hallway that smelled like old carpet and somebody's dinner from hours ago. Apartment 3B at the end of the hall. Cam unlocked the door and then stepped aside. You first, he said. Melody's head snapped up, confusion clear on her face. What, you go in first? So you know where the exit is. So you feel safe. This small gesture, this simple act of giving her control, seemed to mean more to Melody than anything else Cam had said. Her eyes filled with tears again, but different tears this time. The kind that come when you experience unexpected kindness. She stepped through the doorway cautiously, and Cam followed, flipping on the lights. The apartment that greeted them was modest, bordering on sparse. A living room with a couch, coffee table, TV mounted on the wall. A small kitchen visible through a pass-through. A short hallway leading to bedroom and bathroom. Clean but impersonal. Functional furniture, beige walls, nothing that spoke of personality or warmth or life really lived. But it was warm. The heat hit them like a wall, and Melody's whole body seemed to sag with relief. It's so warm, she whispered, her voice full of wonder, as if heat was a luxury she'd forgotten existed. Cam saw his apartment through her eyes then. The nothing he'd been living in suddenly became something. His emptiness became her everything. What he took for granted, 4 walls, a roof, central heating, running water, was wealth beyond measure to a child who'd been sleeping in a basement and eating from dumpsters. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Let me run you a bath, Cam said, heading toward the bathroom. You must be frozen all the way through. As the tub filled with hot water, Cam gathered supplies. He found his smallest t-shirt, though it would still be like a dress on her. Sweatpants with a drawstring that could be tightened. Clean socks, 3 pairs, because her feet must be ice. Towels, soap, the shampoo that had been sitting unused because his hair was too short to need it. He knocked gently on the bathroom door. Melody, I'm leaving clothes out here. Take as long as you want. The door locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer. Through the door, small and tentative, came her voice. Thank you. While Melody bathed, Cam moved to the kitchen. He heated leftover vegetable soup, made grilled cheese sandwiches with the good cheese he usually saved. Simple food, but warm and filling, and made with care. He set the table, put out a glass of glass of water. Napkin, spoon, plate. Small acts of normalcy that felt monumental. 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. Melody emerged, swimming in Cam's clothes, the t-shirt hanging to her knees, sweatpants rolled up multiple times, sleeves rolled so many times her arms looked wrapped in fabric bandages. Her hair was clean and damp, combed with her fingers, and her face was pink from hot water and heat. She looked like a completely different child. Still thin, still weary, still carrying trauma in every line of her small body. But human again, real again, visible again. Feel better? Cam asked. Melody nodded. The water was so warm. I stayed in until it started getting cold. Is that okay? That's perfect, Cam said. Come on, let's get some food in you. Melody sat at the table, her posture stiff and formal, like she was a guest at a fancy dinner instead of a homeless child finally getting a meal. She looked at the soup, at the sandwich, at the milk and water, and her eyes went wide. This is all for me? All for you. She ate slowly at first, careful bites making it last. Cam watched her methodical consumption and realized she was rationing, trying to stretch the meal, because she didn't know when the next one would come. The recognition broke his heart all over again. There's more, he said gently. You can have as much as you want. I can make more soup, more sandwiches, whatever you need. Melody's eyes filled with tears. Really, really, really. She ate second helpings, then third, each bite accompanied by quiet thank yous that Cam tried to wave away, but that kept coming because this child had been taught to be grateful for scraps. As she ate, Cam's mind raced ahead. He couldn't just let her go back to that failed system, but he also couldn't just keep her without going through proper channels. He thought about Eleanor, about the nursery they'd painted yellow for Noah, about the dreams they'd had of caring for a child. Dreams that died 3 years ago in a hospital room. Maybe this was why he'd survived when they hadn't. Maybe this was his second chance at the family he'd lost. Maybe everything that had happened, all the pain and grief and emptiness, had led him to this moment, to this parking lot, to this child who needed him as much as he suddenly realized he needed her. That night, as Melody slept fitfully on Cam's couch under every blanket he owned, he made phone calls. Called the Department of Children and Family Services hotline, explained the situation, requested information about emergency guardianship procedures. Called his supervisor to request time off. Reached out to Derek Chen, his lawyer friend from college, despite the late hour and the fact that they hadn't spoken in over a year. Derek answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Cam, is everything okay? It's Christmas morning, man." "Derek, I need your help," Cam said. And for the first time in 3 years he meant it. As Cam explained the situation to Derek, he watched Melody toss and turn on the couch. Even in sleep, she couldn't find peace. Her small face creased with worry lines that belonged on someone decades older. Her hands clutched the blanket like a lifeline, knuckles white with the effort of holding on. "This is going to be complicated," Derek warned, his voice clearing as he woke fully and shifted into lawyer mode. "The state doesn't like it when people just show up wanting to adopt. There are procedures, background checks, home studies, interviews. It could take months, years even. I don't care how complicated it is," Cam said, his voice firm with a determination he hadn't felt since the day Elena died. "This little girl has been failed by everyone who was supposed to protect her. I won't be another person who walks away." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Derek's voice, quieter, uncertain. "Cam, are you sure about this? I mean, it's been 3 years since Elena and Noah, and you've been pretty isolated. Taking care of a traumatized child is going to be." "I know what it's going to be," Cam interrupted. "And I know I'm not the same person I was before, but maybe that's exactly why I can help her. We both know what it's like to lose everything. We both know what it's like to be alone." When Cam hung up the phone 40 minutes later, he found Melody standing in the doorway between the living room and hallway, tears streaming down her face. "You're still here," she whispered, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "Of course I'm still here," Cam said, kneeling down to her level. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere, but in the morning." Her voice broke. "In the morning," Cam said firmly. "We're going to figure out how to make this work. You're not going back to sleeping in basements or searching through garbage, not while I'm here." Melody launched herself at Cam, then small arms wrapping around his neck in a desperate hug. He froze for a moment, surprised by the contact, then slowly wrapped his arms around her small frame, careful and gentle. She was so light, like she was made of bird bones and hope. He felt something crack open in his chest then. Something that had been frozen solid for 3 years suddenly began to thaw. Not a clean break, but a slow, painful melting that hurt as much as it healed. They stood like that for a long time, a broken man and a broken child, holding each other up in the small hours of Christmas morning. Both of them silently promising the same thing. "I won't let you fall." Eventually, Melody's grip loosened, and she pulled back, wiping at her eyes with her sleeve. Can you stay with me until I fall back asleep?" Cam settled on the floor next to the couch, his back against the coffee table. Melody lay down again, one small hand reaching out to hold his. Cam held it gently, his large hand completely engulfing her tiny fingers, and began to hum. Not quite a lullaby, but something Eleanor used to sing. The tune came back to him after 3 years of silence, rusty but recognizable. Melody's breathing slowed, deepened. As she drifted off, she whispered, "Grandma Ruth used to say, warm water washes away more than dirt. It washes away the day's hard things." Cam's throat tightened. "Your grandma sounds like she was very wise." "She was the smartest person ever," Melody murmured, already half asleep. "She sang all the time, even when she was tired. Said music makes the hard work lighter." Cam kept humming until Melody's hand went slack in his, and her breathing fell into the deep rhythm of genuine sleep. Then he sat there in the dark, watching this small girl who had crashed into his life like a comet, bringing with her chaos and purpose and a reason to keep breathing. He thought about Elena, about how she would have loved this, would have already been making plans, clearing out the spare room, buying clothes and toys and everything a little girl needed. Elena had always been the one with the open heart, the one who saw need, and immediately filled it. Cam had been more cautious, more practical, but maybe Elena's heart had stayed with him after all. Maybe it had just been waiting for the right moment to wake up again. The next morning arrived too quickly and too slow at once. Dawn light crept through the blinds, painting stripes across the living room floor. Cam woke still sitting against the coffee table, his neck protesting the awkward angle. Melody was awake already, sitting up on the couch, watching him with those enormous dark eyes. "Good morning, Cam," said his voice, rough with sleep. "You really stayed," Melody said, wonder in her voice. "Told you I would, but grown-ups don't usually keep their promises." The casual way she said it, like it was a simple fact of life, made Cam want to find every adult who had ever lied to this child and shake them until they understood what they'd done. "I keep mine," he said simply. "Always." Melody studied his face for a long moment, searching for cracks in his certainty. She must have found something trustworthy because she asked, "What do we do now?" "Now," Cam said, standing and stretching out the kinks in his back. "We have breakfast. You like pancakes?" "I don't know. I've never had them. Never had pancakes." Cam felt his heart crack a little more. "Well then, we're making pancakes. Fair warning, though, I'm not very good at it." What happened next would become a core memory for both of them, the kind of moment that defines a relationship. Cam attempted to make pancakes from a box mix that had been in his cabinet for over a year. Melody stood on a chair beside him, watching carefully, asking questions about measurements and mixing. The first batch burned. The second batch was somehow raw in the middle. The third batch Cam flipped too enthusiastically, and it landed half on the pan, half on the stove. Melody giggled. An actual giggle, small and tentative, like a bird testing its wings for the first time. What Cam said mock offended. "That's modern art. Abstract pancake." "That's a mess," Melody corrected, but she was smiling. A real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her whole face. By the fourth batch, they'd figured it out together. The pancakes were lumpy and misshapen, but fully cooked and edible. They sat at the table with butter and syrup, and Melody took her first bite of pancake with the reverence of someone experiencing a sacred ritual. "This is good," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Wait until you've had pancakes made by someone who actually knows what they're doing," Cam said. "These are practice pancakes. Next time will be better. Next time." The words hung in the air between them, a promise of future, of continuity, of more mornings together. After breakfast, while Melody showered again, "She wanted to," she said, "because it felt so good to be clean and warm." Cam started making the calls Derek had outlined. Department of Children and Family Services first. He explained the situation to a woman named Patricia, who sounded tired and overworked and deeply skeptical. "Sir, you can't just keep a child," Patricia said. "There are procedures. The child needs to be placed in licensed foster care while we investigate." "She's been in foster care," Cam argued. Multiple placements in 3 weeks. She's 7 years old, and she was living on the streets eating from dumpsters because the last placement didn't care about her. I understand your concern, Patricia said in a tone that suggested she'd heard it all before. But we have rules for a reason. I'll need to send a caseworker to your location to assess the situation. Fine, send them. But she's not going anywhere until I'm convinced she'll be safe. That's not your decision to make, sir. Watch me make it anyway, Cam said, and hung up. Derek called back an hour later. I pulled some strings. You can keep Melody under emergency placement status for 2 weeks while we file for temporary guardianship. But Cam, you need to understand this is going to be an uphill battle. You're a single man with no child-rearing experience, limited income, a 1-bedroom apartment. The state is going to push back hard. Let them push, Cam said. I'm not giving up. The afternoon of Christmas Day passed in a strange bubble of domesticity. Cam and Melody watched movies, animated films that Cam had never seen, but that Melody seemed to know by heart, whispering the dialogue, along with the characters. They ordered Chinese takeout, because Cam admitted he couldn't really cook beyond basic sandwiches and scrambled eggs. Melody ate orange chicken and fried rice with the same careful rationing she'd shown the night before, and Cam had to keep reminding her that there was more that she could have as much as she wanted. Can I ask you something? Melody said during a quiet moment between movies. Anything. Why are you helping me? Like really why Cam considered the question knowing it deserved an honest answer. Because when I saw you last night, I saw someone who needed help. And I have this apartment and food and warmth, and it seemed wrong to have all that while you had nothing. Melody processed this. But lots of people saw me. Other people who went to the dumpsters. They all looked away. I know. Cam's throat felt tight. And I'm sorry they did, but I couldn't. Why not? Cam looked at this small girl with her enormous eyes and her desperate need to understand the world that had treated her so cruelly. I lost someone, he said finally. 3 years ago. Someone very important to me. Actually 2 someones. And afterward I spent a long time wishing someone had stopped for me, had seen that I was drowning, and offered to help. No one did. So when I saw you, I couldn't be the person who walks away. I couldn't do to you what was done to me. Who did you lose? My wife, Elena, and our baby son, Noah. They died together. Melody's eyes went very wide. Both of them. Both of them. It was during childbirth. Something went wrong and the doctors couldn't fix it. And in about an hour, my whole future disappeared. That's really sad, Melody said quietly. It is. It was. It still is sometimes. Do you think Grandma Ruth and your Elena and Noah are together now? Like in heaven or somewhere? The question surprised Cam. He hadn't thought about heaven or afterlife or any of it in 3 years. He'd been too angry at a God who would allow such losses. Maybe he said, I hope so. I hope they're somewhere warm and safe, and that they know we're thinking about them. Melody nodded, satisfied with this answer. Grandma Ruth used to say that people we love never really leave us. They live in our hearts and in the things they taught us. Your grandma was right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the movie playing forgotten in the background. Then Melody asked, Do you think Elena and Noah would be okay with me being here? Cam felt tears prick his eyes. I think Elena would have loved you immediately. She always wanted to help people. And Noah. He took a breath. Noah was going to sleep in a yellow room we painted together. There were going to be stars on the ceiling and books on the shelves. All the things I wanted to give him but never got to. I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Later, as evening approached, and Melody started showing signs of exhaustion again, Cam made up the couch with fresh sheets and extra blankets. He gave Melody one of his old t-shirts to sleep in, cleaner than the one from the night before, and watched as she carefully folded her purple jacket and placed it at the foot of the couch like a security blanket. "Do you have bad dreams?" Melody asked suddenly. "Sometimes," Cam admitted. "Do you every night?" "Usually about the morning I couldn't wake up Grandma Ruth, or about the basement where I was sleeping, or about being hungry and no one caring." Cam's heart broke all over again. "If you have a bad dream, you call for me, okay? I'm just in the next room. I'll come. Promise, promise." Melody settled under the blankets, her small body barely making a dent in the couch cushions. Cam moved to turn off the lights, but Melody's voice stopped him. "Can you leave the hall light on?" "I don't like complete dark." "Of course. Hall light stays on." "Anything else? Will you read me a story?" "Grandma Ruth used to read me stories every night before bed." Cam went to his bookshelf, to the bottom shelf, where he'd shoved all of Noah's books 3 years ago and never looked at them since. He pulled out Where the Wild Things Are, the cover worn and familiar. He sat in the chair near the couch and began to read. His voice cracked on the first page, shaky on the second, but by the third page it had found its rhythm. Melody listened with rapt attention, her eyes tracking his face more than the pictures. That night, Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. Cam read, and Melody smiled because mischief was something she understood. By the time Max sailed back to his room where his supper was waiting for him, and it was still hot, Melody's eyes were drooping. Cam closed the book gently. "Did you like it?" "It was perfect," Melody murmured, already half asleep. "Can we read another tomorrow?" "We can read one every night if you want." "Every night?" "Every night you're here." "How long will that be?" Cam looked at this brave little girl who'd survived things no child should have to survive, who'd kept going even when she had every reason to give up and made a promise he had no authority to make, but absolute determination to keep. "As long as you want to stay." Melody's eyes had closed, but a small smile played at her lips. "Forever then," she whispered. "Forever then," Cam echoed, and meant it with every fiber of his being. After Melody fell asleep, Cam sat in the dark living room with only the hall light cutting a strip of illumination across the floor. He should go to bed. He had calls to make in the morning, forms to fill out, a battle to prepare for. But sleep felt impossible with memories churning through his mind like a storm. 3 years. It had been exactly 3 years, 2 months and 14 days since Elena died. Cam closed his eyes and let himself remember. Really remember, not the abbreviated version he usually allowed himself when the grief got too sharp. Elena had been light itself. That was the only way to describe her. She walked into rooms, and they got brighter. She laughed, and the world felt less heavy. She saw hurt, and immediately moved to heal it, saw need, and filled it, saw loneliness, and offered companionship. She collected strays, people, and animals both, and loved them fiercely until they believed they were worth loving. Cam had been one of those strays in a way. They'd met in college, Cam all sharp edges and cynicism. Elena all warmth and unshakable optimism. She'd seen something in him worth saving, and she'd loved him into becoming a better version of himself. When she got pregnant, they'd been ecstatic. Terrified, yes, but mostly ecstatic. They'd painted the nursery together on weekends, Elena directing from a chair, while Cam did the actual painting because she wasn't supposed to be around the fumes. Yellow, she'd insisted. Bright and happy. Like sunshine lives here. They'd spent evenings talking to Elena's growing belly, telling Noah about the world he was about to join. Elena would place Cam's hand on her stomach, and they'd feel Noah kick, and Cam would be overwhelmed with love for this tiny person he hadn't even met yet. He remembered that last morning with perfect clarity, every detail burned into his brain like a brand. March 3rd. A Thursday, rain drumming against the windows. Elena had complained of feeling dizzy at breakfast, mentioned that something felt off. Cam, focused on his work presentation, had told her it was probably just pregnancy fatigue, that she should rest. He'd left for work despite the worried look in her eyes. The call came at 11:47 a.m. The time was seared into Cam's memory because he'd looked at his phone and thought about not answering, about letting it go to voicemail because he was in a meeting. But something made him answer. "Brooks, this is Seattle General Hospital. Your wife, Eleanor, has been brought in by ambulance. You need to come right away." The drive to the hospital was a blur of broken traffic laws and desperate prayers to a God Cam wasn't sure he believed in. Please, 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 over and over, like a mantra that could change reality through sheer force of repetition. He'd burst through the emergency room doors, demanded to know where his wife was, been directed to a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. He'd paced for hours, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Then the doctor emerged. Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that couldn't quite meet his. The words came in fragments. Amniotic fluid embolism. Extremely rare. 1 in 40,000 pregnancies. No warning signs, no way to predict, no way to prevent. Maternal mortality rate near 90%. She fought. Dr. Martinez said, "We did everything we could, but the baby's heart rate dropped too far, and when we performed the emergency C-section, he wasn't breathing. We tried to resuscitate for 37 minutes. I'm so sorry. They're both gone." Cam remembered the sensation of the floor tilting, of gravity reversing, of the entire world turning inside out. He'd fallen into a chair, and a sound had come out of him that didn't seem human. A howl of pure anguish that made nurses look away and other families in the waiting room press closer together. He'd insisted on seeing them. Elena still looked like she was sleeping, so beautiful and peaceful that for a moment Cam's brain couldn't reconcile her serene face with the word gone. Noah was so tiny, just over 6 pounds, perfect in every way, except that he'd never drawn a breath, never opened his eyes, never had a chance. Cam had held his son for an hour, whispering all the things he'd never get to say, making promises he'd never get to keep. He'd kissed Elena's forehead and thanked her for giving him the best years of his life, apologized for not being there when she needed him most. The guilt had come later, the endless what-ifs that circled his brain like vultures. What if he'd stayed home that morning? What if he'd insisted she see a doctor when she said she felt off? What if he'd paid better attention? The doctor said outcome would likely have been the same either way. Likely, not definitely. That word haunted Cam. Likely meant maybe not. Likely meant there was a chance, however small, that if he'd acted differently, they'd still be alive. For 3 years, Cam had carried that weight. For 3 years, he'd punished himself by existing instead of living. He'd moved to a smaller apartment because the old one held too many memories. He'd packed Elena's things in boxes that he'd never unpacked. He'd sold or donated most of their furniture, keeping only the bare essentials. He'd quit his job in marketing because his co-workers kept looking at him with pity and asking how he was doing. He'd taken the security guard position because it required minimal human interaction and left him alone with his grief. He'd convinced himself this was enough, that he didn't need or want more, that emotional isolation was safer than risking his heart again. Until last night, until Melody. Cam looked at the small shape on his couch, this tiny girl who'd been orphaned twice, who'd survived things no child should have to survive, who'd been failed by every adult who was supposed to protect her. And he understood finally why he was still alive when Elena and Noah weren't. He couldn't save his wife. He couldn't save his son. But he could save this little girl. Maybe Elena had sent her. Maybe this was Elena's way of telling him it was okay to open his heart again, okay to love something fragile and mortal and terrifyingly temporary. Maybe Noah's empty yellow room had always been meant for Melody. Or maybe it was just coincidence and chance and the intersection of two broken people who needed each other at exactly the right moment. Either way, Cam knew with absolute certainty he wasn't letting Melody go. Whatever it took, whatever battles he had to fight, whatever hoops he had to jump through, he was keeping her safe. The state had failed her. Her mother had failed her. Even her grandmother, through no fault of her own, had left her alone. But Cam wouldn't fail her. He'd already lost one family. He'd be damned if he lost another. Cam woke to screaming. He jolted upright in his bed, heart hammering, momentarily disoriented. Then memory crashed back, and he was on his feet, rushing to the living room. Melody was tangled in the blankets, thrashing, eyes wide and unseeing in the darkness. Her screams were raw and terrible sounds that came from the deepest place of trauma. No, please don't take me back. I'll be good, I promise, I'll be good. Cam approached carefully, not wanting to startle her further. Melody, he said firmly but gently, you're safe. You're with me. You're home. Melody's wild eyes focused slowly on his face. The screaming stopped, but the trembling continued, her whole small body shaking like a leaf in a storm. Where? Her voice came out hoarse and confused. Where am I? My apartment. You're safe. It's just a bad dream. Reality settled over her in layers. She looked around, taking in the familiar room, the hall light still burning, the blankets twisted around her legs. Her breathing started to slow, but her hands still gripped the sheets with white-knuckled intensity. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry for waking you. Cam's heart broke. Don't apologize. Bad dreams aren't your fault. Melody's eyes filled with tears. I dreamed that Grandma Ruth came to get me, but you wouldn't let me go with her. You said I was too much trouble, that you didn't want me anymore. You gave me back. Cam moved to sit on the floor beside the couch, close enough to offer comfort, but not crowding her. Oh, sweetheart, that's not going to happen. Everyone gives me back eventually, Melody said, and the flat certainty in her voice was devastating. First my mama, then the foster families. Why would you be different? Because Cam said, choosing his words carefully, I know what loss feels like. I know what it's like to have everything disappear. And I would never, ever do that to someone else. Especially not to you. How do I know that? How do I know you won't change your mind tomorrow or next week or when I'm too much work? Cam looked at this brave, broken little girl who had every reason not to trust him and had trusted him anyway. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone else. Melody nodded, wiping at her tears. When Elena and Noah died, I wanted to die too. For a long time, I was just existing. Going through the motions. I wasn't really living. I was a ghost in my own life. He paused, making sure she understood. Then I saw you last night and something woke up in me. Something I thought was dead. You gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. A reason to care about something beyond just getting through another day. Melody studied his face. So I'm helping you too. You're saving me, Cam said honestly. Just like I'm trying to save you. We're saving each other. Melody processed this, her 7-year-old brain working through concepts that were complex even for adults. Can I hold your hand? Cam extended his hand, and Melody's small fingers wrapped around 2 of his. They sat like that in the darkness, connected by touch and shared grief, and the fragile beginning of trust. Do you want to talk about the nightmare? Cam asked softly. It's always the same, Melody said. Either I can't wake up Grandma Ruth, or I'm back in the basement, or someone's taking me away and no one cares. I care, Cam said. And I'm right here, And every time you have a nightmare, you call for me, and I'll come. I promise. You keep saying that word. Promise. Because I mean it. When I make a promise, I keep it. Always. Melody yawned, then exhaustion pulling at her, despite the terror that had woken her. Cam stayed sitting on the floor holding her hand until her breathing deepened and she drifted back to sleep. Then he stayed longer, just to be sure. Morning arrived for real a few hours later. Dawn light creeping through the blinds. Cam woke still on the floor, his back screaming in protest. Melody was already awake, sitting up on the couch watching him. "You really stayed," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "Told you I would." Cam stood with difficulty, his back popping and cracking. He was too old to be sleeping on floors. "What do we do today?" Melody asked. "Today," Cam said, "we start building routines. Structure is going to help you feel safe. How about we make a schedule together?" They spent breakfast slightly less disastrous pancakes this time, creating a daily schedule. Melody watched as Cam wrote it out on a piece of paper. Morning breakfast together. Midday reading time, art time, quiet time, afternoon lunch activity. Evening, dinner, bath, story, bedtime. Simple, predictable, safe. "We'll put this on the refrigerator," Cam explained, "so you always know what comes next. If you know what to expect, it's less scary." Melody touched the paper reverently. "Grandma Ruth and I had routines too. She said routines make the world make sense. Your grandma was right about a lot of things." After breakfast, while Melody showered, she was taking 2 or 3 showers a day. Cam noticed like she couldn't get enough of being clean and warm. Cam made the calls Derek had outlined. First, the Department of Children and Family Services. A different person this time, a woman named Vanessa Cole, who would be Melody's assigned caseworker. "Mr. Brooks." Vanessa said, her voice professionally neutral. "I understand you have a child in your care who was found homeless." "Yes. Her name is Melody. She's 7. She was living on the streets after foster placements failed." "I see. Well, I'll need to come assess the situation. Can I come by this afternoon?" "Sure. We'll be here. And Mr. Brooks. Please don't get too attached. We'll need to place Melody in licensed foster care while we investigate the circumstances. She's already been in foster care, multiple times. It didn't work. Nevertheless, those are the procedures." After Vanessa hung up, Cam called Derek to update him. "She's coming this afternoon," Cam said. "The caseworker, Vanessa Cole. Let her see how Melody responds to you," Derek advised. "Let her see the bond that's already forming. It's your best argument. What if she takes Melody anyway? Then we fight. But Cam, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this doesn't go the way you want. The state prefers licensed foster homes. You're an unknown quantity." "Then I'll become known," Cam said. "Whatever it takes." Vanessa Cole arrived at 2 o'clock carrying a clipboard and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and believed very little. She was in her early 30s, black with natural hair pulled back in a professional bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Brooks," she said, extending a hand. "Call me Cam. Come in." Vanessa entered and immediately began assessing the apartment with a caseworker's eye. Cam watched her take in the modest furnishings, the clean but Spartan space, the distinct lack of anything child-friendly. "And where is Melody?" "In the bedroom. Reading. She's shy around new people." Vanessa made a note on her clipboard. "I'll need to speak with her separately. It's procedure." "I understand, but she's been through a lot. Please be gentle." "I'm always gentle, Mr. Brooks, but I'm also thorough." Vanessa spent the next 30 minutes asking Cam questions. How did he find Melody? What were his intentions? Did he understand the legal implications? Was he prepared for the financial burden? Did he have child-rearing experience? Cam answered honestly. Knowing lies would only hurt his case. No, he didn't have experience. Yes, his apartment was small. Yes, his income was modest. But yes, he was committed. Yes, he would do whatever it took to keep Melody safe. And why Vanessa asked her pen poised over her clipboard. "Are you so invested in this child you met 2 days ago?" Cam looked her straight in the eye. "Because I know what it's like to need someone and have no one show up. Because I have the resources to help and it would be morally wrong not to. Because that little girl deserves someone who won't give up on her." Vanessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Can I speak with Melody now?" Cam knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Melody, the social worker is here. She wants to talk to you." Melody emerged slowly, clutching the book she'd been reading, one of Noah's old picture books about dinosaurs. She looked at Vanessa with obvious fear. "Hi, Melody." "Vanessa," said her voice noticeably softer. "I'm Vanessa. I work with children to make sure they're safe and happy. Can we talk for a few minutes?" Melody looked at Cam. "Will you stay? I'll be right outside the door," Cam promised. "You're not alone." The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Cam paced in the living room, stomach churning with anxiety. Finally, the bedroom door opened and Vanessa emerged, Melody trailing behind her. "Thank you for your time, Melody," Vanessa said. "You've been very helpful." Melody immediately went to Cam's side, pressing against him like a magnet finding metal. Vanessa made several more notes on her clipboard before looking up. "Mr. Brooks, I'll need to file my report and consult with my supervisor. For now, I'm classifying this as emergency placement. Melody can stay with you temporarily while we investigate. But I need to be clear, this is not permanent. We'll need to conduct a full home study background checks, psychological evaluations. And at any point, if we determine this placement isn't in Melody's best interest, she will be moved to licensed foster care." "I understand," Cam said, though he was already planning how to fight if it came to that. After Vanessa left, Melody stayed pressed against Cam's side. "What did she ask you?" "Questions about if I feel safe, if you're nice to me, if I have food and a place to sleep." "And what did you tell her?" Melody looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes. "I told her you're the first person who's ever kept a promise, that I feel safer here than anywhere I've ever been, that you make pancakes even though you're bad at it, and that you read me stories and that you stayed all night when I had a bad dream." Cam's throat felt too tight to speak. He just pulled Melody into a hug and held on. The rest of the afternoon passed in the strange limbo of waiting. They read more books colored with crayons Cam had picked up at the pharmacy, watched another movie. Normal things that felt monumental because they were doing them together. That evening, Cam realized they needed groceries. Real groceries, not just the random items he'd been subsisting on, which meant taking Melody out in public for the first time. "We need to go to the store," Cam explained. "Get proper food. Will you be okay with that?" Melody nodded but looked nervous. "What if someone sees me? What if they take me?" "No one's taking you. I promise. You're with me, and I won't let anything happen to you." The grocery store was overwhelming for Melody. Cam could see it in the way her eyes went wide at the bright lights and the crowds of people. She stayed close to him, one hand gripping the shopping cart like an anchor. They made their way down the aisles, Cam asking what Melody liked to eat. Melody looking confused by the question, as if liking something had never been a factor before. When they reached the cereal aisle, Melody stopped. She stared at the wall of colorful boxes like she was looking at an alien landscape. "Pick whichever one you want," Cam said. Melody reached out tentatively toward a box of chocolate cereal, then pulled her hand back. She looked at the price tag, then at a generic brand on the bottom shelf. "That one's expensive," she said quietly. "We should get the cheap kind." Cam's heart cracked. "Melody, you can pick anyone you want. Price doesn't matter, but Grandma Ruth always said we had to get the cheapest because money doesn't grow on trees. Your grandma was working hard to take care of you with very little help. But I have enough. We're not rich, but we have enough for chocolate cereal if that's what you want." Melody stared at the chocolate cereal box for a long moment. Really? Really? She took the box from the shelf carefully, like it might break, and placed it in the cart with reverence. "Thank you. You're welcome. Now pick 2 more. 2 more," Melody's voice shot up an octave. 3 cereals for 3 weeks. We'll rotate. Variety is good." Cam watched Melody's face transform as she realized this wasn't a trick, that he really meant it. She chose 2 more boxes, not the most expensive, but not the cheapest either. Middle choices that broke Cam's heart, because even in this small thing, she was trying not to be a burden. As they moved through the store, Melody began to relax. By the frozen foods, she was asking questions about what different things were. By the produce, she was suggesting items she'd had before. By the bakery, she was smiling at the woman handing out free cookie samples. At checkout, Melody carefully placed each item on the conveyor belt, organizing them by category without being asked. The cashier smiled at her. "You're a good helper," the cashier said. "Thank you," Melody replied politely, and Cam felt a surge of pride at her manners, at the resilience that let her be polite, even after everything she'd been through. The total came to $143.67. Melody watched anxiously as Cam swiped his card. "Is that okay?" she whispered. "It's perfect," Cam said. "You're worth every penny." Back at the apartment, they put away groceries together. Melody wanted to help with everything, carrying items from bags to cabinets, asking where things should go. Creating ownership, Cam realized, making this space feel like it belonged to her too. That night, as he tucked her in, Melody asked Cam, "Do you think we could do that again?" "The grocery shopping?" "Of course. We'll go every week. Make it our tradition." "I like traditions," Melody said sleepily. Grandma Ruth said traditions are the threads that hold families together. Then we'll make lots of traditions. Cam promised, and we'll hold tight. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and surreal. Cam had never been solely responsible for another human being before, let alone a traumatized 7-year-old. But he and Melody figured it out together, stumbling through the learning curve with patience and grace and occasional disasters. Day 3 brought the discovery that Melody had been hoarding food. Cam found granola bars hidden behind the cereal boxes in the pantry, juice boxes under her pillow, a half loaf of bread going stale in the closet. He sat in the kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at the hidden stash he'd collected, his hands shaking. 12 granola bars, 7 juice boxes, bread, crackers, small packets of peanut butter from the pharmacy. All carefully hidden, all saved for emergencies that Melody's survival instinct told her were inevitable. Cam heard a sound and turned to find Melody in the doorway, tears already streaming down her face. "You're not taking it away?" Her voice was tiny, terrified. Cam felt his own eyes burn. "No, sweetheart, I'm just—" He couldn't finish. Couldn't explain that he was crying over granola bars because they represented every moment of fear this child had lived through, every time she'd gone hungry, every time she'd learned that security was an illusion. Melody padded across the floor in the 2 big pajamas Cam had bought her. "You're sad." "Yeah," Cam admitted, because lying seemed worse. "I'm sad that you felt like you needed to hide this. I'm sad that adults taught you food wasn't safe." She slipped her small hand into his. "It's okay to be sad sometimes. Grandma Ruth used to say that tears are just love that has nowhere else to go." And Cam realized in that moment that he didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to show up honestly and let this brave little girl teach him how to heal too. They made a deal that night. Cam cleared a shelf in the pantry. Melody's shelf, he called it. She could keep whatever food she wanted there, and he would never touch it without asking. Half of her hidden stash went to her shelf. The other half stayed hidden in various spots around the apartment, and Cam didn't push. Healing takes time. Day 4 brought laughter. Real, genuine laughter that filled the apartment like music. Cam attempted to braid Melody's hair using a YouTube tutorial and failed spectacularly. Melody looked in the mirror at the lopsided, lumpy result and giggled. Then the giggle became a laugh. A real, full child's laugh that made Cam's heart soar. "That looks like a bird's nest," she said between laughs. "A very artistic bird's nest," Cam defended. "Modern art." They tried again. Melody patiently talking Cam through the steps until they achieved something that vaguely resembled a braid. It wasn't pretty, but they'd done it together. Day 5 brought the first real test. Melody had a nightmare worse than the others, screaming herself awake at 4 in the morning. When Cam rushed in, she was hyperventilating, convinced she was back in the basement, that Grandma Ruth was dead all over again, that everything warm and safe had been another cruel dream. "Look at me," Cam said firmly, holding her shoulders gently. "Open your eyes and look at me." Melody's wild eyes focused on his face. "Where are you?" Cam asked. Your apartment." "That's right." "And who am I, Cam?" "You're Cam." "And are you safe?" I think so." "You are. You're safe. You're home with me, and I'm not going anywhere." He sat with her until sunrise, holding her hand, reminding her where she was every time panic threatened to pull her under again. By morning she was exhausted but calm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Stop apologizing for nightmares. They're not your fault. Trauma does this. But we'll get through it together, okay? Okay." Day 6 brought an unexpected gift. Teresa Abbott, the neighbor from 3D, who Cam had maybe exchanged 10 words with in the year he'd lived there, knocked on his door. "I've noticed you have a little one staying with you," she said. She was in her 60s, grey hair, kind eyes. "If you need any help, babysitting advice, anything, I raised 3 girls of my own. I'm happy to help." Cam felt tears prick his eyes at this simple offer of support. "Thank you. I might take you up on that." Teresa became a regular presence after that. She brought over a bag of girls' clothes her granddaughters had outgrown. She showed Cam how to properly braid hair. She sat with Melody one afternoon while Cam went to a meeting with Derek, and when he came back, they were baking cookies together, and Melody was smiling. Day 7 brought Christmas leftovers from Teresa. A care package from Derek's wife with art supplies and books, and a small but significant breakthrough. Melody put away her purple jacket. Not permanently. She still kept it close, folded on the end of her bed. But for the first time she took it off without prompting, and didn't need to wear it inside to feel safe. That evening, Cam and Melody made dinner together, spaghetti and meatballs, from a recipe Cam's mom used to make. The kitchen became a mess of flour and sauce and laughter. Melody got sauce on her nose and Cam wiped it off, and she didn't flinch away from the touch like she had the first few days. After dinner they washed dishes together. Melody stood on a chair to reach the sink, carefully scrubbing plates, while Cam dried. The radio played soft music in the background, and snow fell outside the window, and for a moment everything was perfect in its ordinariness. "Can I tell you something?" Melody asked suddenly. "Always. I think I'm starting to feel like this is home. Like really home, not just a place I'm staying until people decide to move me somewhere else." Cam set down the dish towel and looked at this brave little girl who'd been through hell and was still willing to hope. "This is home, Melody, for as long as you want it to be. What if the social worker says I have to leave? Then I'll fight to keep you. I'll fight as hard as I can. And if you lose, Cam took a breath, knowing she deserved honesty. "Then I'll visit you as much as they let me. I'll write you letters. I'll never stop caring about you. But I'm not planning to lose. We're going to make this work." Melody climbed down from the chair and hugged him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. "I love you," she whispered into his shirt. Cam froze. She'd said it so simply, so naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world, and something that had been locked tight in his chest for 3 years finally broke open. "I love you too, Ruby." The nickname slipped out without thought, but it felt right. Ruby. Precious and rare, just like he'd said that first night. Melody looked up, smiling. "Ruby, if you want. You said your name is Melody, but you remind me of a ruby. Strong and beautiful even after being under pressure." "I like it," Melody said. "Ruby." She tested it out. "Ruby Brooks. That sounds like a real name. Like I'm a real person who belongs somewhere." "You are," Cam said. "You absolutely are." That night, as Cam tucked Ruby into bed and read her another story from Noah's collection, he thought about the past week. 7 days that had transformed his entire life. 7 days of learning how to be what this child needed, while discovering that maybe she was what he needed too. Healing isn't a straight line, he'd told her after one of her nightmares. It's more like a spiral. Sometimes you circle back to old pain, but each time you're a little bit higher, a little bit stronger, a little closer to okay. Ruby had absorbed this wisdom with her characteristic seriousness. "So we're both spiraling." "Both spiraling," Cam agreed. "But spiraling up, together." Together, Ruby echoed and fell asleep, holding his hand. Cam stayed there long after her breathing deepened, watching this small miracle who'd crashed into his life and given him a reason to live again. He thought about Elena and Noah, about the family he'd lost, and the one he was building now. Different, but no less precious. Not a replacement, but a continuation. Love doesn't replace love. It expands to hold more. He whispered into the darkness. "If you sent her to me." "Elena, thank you. I'll take care of her, I promise. I'll be the dad. I never got to be to Noah. I'll do better. I'll be better." And somewhere in the space between waking and sleeping, Cam could have sworn he felt a gentle touch on his shoulder, a warmth that felt like blessing, like permission, like love that never really dies, but just changes form. Week 2 began with another visit from Vanessa Cole. This time she came with a folder thick with paperwork, and an expression that told Cam he wasn't going to like what she had to say. "Mr. Brooks." She began settling into a chair in the living room, while Ruby played quietly in the bedroom. "I've completed my preliminary assessment." Cam's stomach clenched, and Vanessa opened the folder. "The good news is that Ruby is clearly bonding with you. Her teachers report significant improvement in her demeanor. Ruby's in school already. I enrolled her at Lincoln Elementary. It's required by law, and structure is good for traumatized children." Cam bit back his frustration that no one had consulted him. "And the bad news," Vanessa's expression remained neutral. "The bad news is that your current living situation is concerning. Single male, 1-bedroom apartment, modest income, no formal child-rearing experience. My supervisor has questions about the appropriateness of this placement. Ruby is thriving here," Cam said, keeping his voice level despite the anger rising in his chest. "I can see that. But we have to think long-term. Can you provide for all of Ruby's needs? Medical care, therapy, proper sleeping arrangements, educational support?" "Yes," Cam said firmly. "I can and I will. I've already started the guardianship application. I'm getting a 2-bedroom apartment in this building. I've set up appointments with a child therapist. I'm doing everything required." Vanessa made notes. That's commendable. However, there's another factor we need to discuss. She pulled out a document and handed it to Cam. He scanned it, his blood running cold. Someone else has filed a petition to adopt Ruby. James Reed, a 52-year-old widower, significant financial resources, owns a 5-bedroom home in Bellevue. He saw Ruby's story in the local news coverage and has expressed serious interest in providing her with a stable home. Cam's hands clenched around the paper. Ruby doesn't even know this person. Neither did she know you when you took her in. Vanessa pointed out. Mr. Reed has already passed the initial background checks. His home study is being expedited. Legally, his petition was filed before yours, which gives him priority. This isn't about who filed first. Cam said, his voice rising. It's about what's best for Ruby. She's happy here. She's healing here. I understand your attachment, Mr. Brooks, but my job is to ensure Ruby's best interests, not to validate your emotional needs. The words hit Cam like a slap. You think this is about me? I'm trying to give that little girl a family, a home, someone who won't abandon her like everyone else has. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. I believe your intentions are good, but intentions aren't enough. The court will look at who can provide the best life for Ruby. Mr. Reed can offer private schools therapy opportunities you can't match on a security guard's salary. Money doesn't make a family, Cam said quietly. No, but it provides stability. And stability is what Ruby needs. After Vanessa left, Cam sat in stunned silence. Ruby emerged from the bedroom, her face worried. Is she taking me away? Cam pulled her into his lap. Not if I have anything to say about it. But that man she talked about is nobody. You don't know him and he doesn't know you. This is your home. You're staying here. But what if the judge says I have to go? Cam looked into Ruby's terrified eyes and made a promise he had no authority to make but every intention to keep. Then we'll fight. And we won't stop fighting until you're safe. That night, Cam called Derek in a panic. Derek listened to the whole story before responding. Okay, Derek said calmly. This isn't ideal, but it's not over. We need to build your case. Gather evidence of Ruby's progress. Get statements from her teachers, from Teresa, from anyone who's seen you two together. And we need to be prepared for the home study. What's that involve? Everything. They'll inspect your apartment, interview. You extensively possibly require psychological evaluation, financial disclosure, background checks going back years. They're going to put your entire life under a microscope. Let them, Cam said. I have nothing to hide. What about this James Reed? Can we find out more about him? I'm already on it, Derek said. Something feels off about someone who sees a news story and immediately decides to adopt. I'll dig into his background. Week 3 brought the move to the 2-bedroom apartment. It was on the 2nd floor of the same building, slightly more expensive but manageable. Teresa helped them pack and unpack, turning the process into an adventure for Ruby. The new apartment felt different immediately. Ruby had her own room for the first time in weeks. They painted it together pale purple, Ruby's choice because it reminded her of Grandma Ruth and the jacket that had kept her safe. They hung pictures, assembled furniture that Cam bought second-hand, made it hers. This is really mine, Ruby asked, standing in the doorway of her completed room. Really yours, Cam confirmed. Your safe space, your home. Ruby threw her arms around him. Thank you, Daddy. The word stopped Cam's heart. She'd called him Cam since that first night, never Dad or Daddy. But now, spontaneously, she'd given him the title he'd thought he'd never hear. You're welcome, baby girl, he managed through the tightness in his throat. Week 4 brought Dr. Sophia Grant into their lives. She was the child psychologist assigned to evaluate both Ruby and Cam as part of the home study process. Unlike Vanessa, Dr. Grant radiated warmth. She had kind eyes and a gentle manner that put Ruby at ease almost immediately. The first session was just observation. Dr. Grant watched Cam and Ruby interact, noting how Ruby sought his presence, How Cam responded with patience and attentiveness. How they communicated in the shorthand of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. "You have a beautiful bond," DeGrant commented after Ruby had gone to play in her room. "We're working on it," Cam said. "She still has nightmares. Still hoards food sometimes. Still tests boundaries to see if I'll leave." "That's normal for a child with her trauma history," Dr. Grant said. "But she's making remarkable progress." "Do you know why?" Cam shook his head. "Because you're giving her the two things she needs most: consistency and unconditional positive regard. You show up. You don't waver. You love her regardless of her behavior. That's exactly what attachment research tells us traumatized children need to heal." "I just want her to be happy," Cam said simply. "I can see that, and I'll make sure my report reflects it." But week 4 also brought darker news. Derek called one evening, his voice troubled. "I found something on James Reed." Derek said, "He's tried to adopt before, multiple times. So maybe he really wants kids. It's the pattern that's concerning. He pursues adoption, aggressively gets approved, then withdraws at the last minute. 3 times in the past 6 years. Why would he do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out." But Cam, it looks like he treats adoption as, I don't know, a project, something to pursue for the challenge. Then loses interest when it becomes real. "We need to tell Vanessa." "I already did. She's concerned too, but legally Reed hasn't done anything wrong. He's allowed to change his mind, and his current petition is valid. So what do? We keep building your case and hope the judge sees what we see, that Reed's history shows instability while you've shown commitment." Week 5 brought the meeting Cam had been dreading. The state required potential adoptive parents to meet before the court hearing. The theory was that it promoted cooperation and helped everyone remember this was about the child's welfare, not a competition. The reality felt more like showing up for battle. The meeting took place in a conference room at the Department of Children and Family Services. Derek accompanied Cam. James Reed arrived with his lawyer, a severe-looking woman in an expensive suit, who immediately took control of the room. "Mr. Brooks," Reed said, extending a hand. "James Reed, a pleasure to meet you." Reed was everything Cam wasn't. Tall, distinguished-looking silver hair, perfectly styled suit that probably cost more than Cam made in a month. He had the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Cam shook his hand reluctantly. "Mr. Reed, please call me James. We're all here for Ruby's benefit, after all." They sat across a table that felt like a chasm. Reed's lawyer, Ms. Harrison, opened a folder. "Mr. Brooks," she began, "I want to be clear that we have tremendous respect for what you did. Taking in a homeless child, providing immediate care, that's commendable. But we need to think about Ruby's long-term needs. I am thinking about her long-term needs," Cam said. "That's why I'm seeking to adopt her." Ms. Harrison smiled thinly. "With all due respect, what can you offer her? You work night shifts as a security guard. You live in a modest apartment. You have no family support network, no relevant experience. I offer her love," Cam said. "Consistency. Someone who shows up every day and doesn't give up when things get hard." "Love is wonderful." Reed interjected, his voice smooth as oil. "But children need more than love. They need opportunities. I can provide Ruby with the best schools. Travel, cultural experiences, everything she deserves. She deserves a parent who won't abandon her." Cam shot back. Reed's smile didn't falter. "I'm not sure what you're implying." Derek spoke up. "Mr. Reed, can you explain why you've withdrawn from 3 previous adoption attempts?" Ms. Harrison intervened. "That's irrelevant to this case." "It's extremely relevant," Derek countered. "It speaks to commitment and follow-through." Reed's expression finally showed a crack. Those situations were different. The timing wasn't right. "And what makes the timing right now?" Cam asked. Reed looked directly at Cam. I saw Ruby's story on the news. A child orphaned twice failed by the people who should have protected her. It resonated with me. I lost my wife 2 years ago, and I've been looking for purpose since then. So, Ruby's a project. Cam's voice rose. A way to feel better about yourself. She's a child who deserves every advantage I can give her, Reed said sharply. She's a child who's been bounced between homes and placements and doesn't need another adult who's going to walk away when it gets inconvenient. The room fell silent. Cam's hands were shaking. Derek put a warning hand on his arm. Gentlemen, Vanessa said, having sat quietly through the exchange. This isn't productive. The judge will make the final decision based on Ruby's best interests. I suggest we all focus on demonstrating our commitment through our actions, not our words. After the meeting, Cam felt sick. Derek tried to reassure him. You did fine. You were passionate, and that counts for something. He can give her everything I can't. Cam said hollowly. He can give her money and things. You're giving her yourself. That's infinitely more valuable. But Cam couldn't shake the fear that it wouldn't be enough. That evening, Ruby noticed something was wrong. You're sad, she observed. Just worried, Cam admitted. About the other man? The one who wants to adopt me. Cam was constantly amazed by how much this child picked up on. Yeah. About him. Ruby climbed into Cam's lap, a rare gesture of comfort that she usually reserved for after nightmares. I don't want to go with him. I don't even know him. I know, sweetheart. He's a stranger. You're my dad. Those words, you're my dad, gave Cam strength he didn't know he had. We're going to fight, Ruby, as hard as we can. And if we lose, Cam pulled her closer. We won't. We can't. But week 6 brought another blow. Derek called with news. Reed's home study came back perfect. Beautiful house, financial stability, excellent references. And he's offering to pay for Ruby's therapy private school college fund. Of course he is, Cam said bitterly. There's more. He's pushing for the hearing to be moved up, wants to fast-track the process. Can he do that? His lawyer is arguing that every day Ruby spends in temporary placement instead of a permanent home is harmful to her development. The judge might agree. So when 3 weeks, the hearing is in 3 weeks, Cam felt the world tilt. That soon, which means we need to prepare. I'm going to coach you on what to say, what not to say. And we need Ruby ready to testify if it comes to that. She's 7 years old, and she's the most important witness we have. If she can tell the judge how she feels, that carries enormous weight. Over the next week, Cam threw himself into preparation. Dr. Grant worked with Ruby, gently preparing her for what might happen in court. Teresa wrote a detailed letter about the transformation she'd witnessed. Ruby's teacher submitted a report noting significant academic and social progress. But the opposition was building too. Reed's resources allowed him to hire investigators who compiled a report on Cam. Nothing damaging, but the subtext was clear. This is what we're comparing: a wealthy, stable, experienced professional versus a working-class, grieving, inexperienced widower. The final week before the hearing, Ruby had the worst nightmare yet. Cam woke to her screaming at the top of her lungs, a sound of pure terror that made his blood run cold. He rushed to her room and found her sitting up in bed, eyes wide and unseeing. Don't make me go. Please don't make me go. I'll be good. I promise, Ruby, Cam said firmly, sitting on her bed and taking her shoulders gently. Look at me. Open your eyes. Her eyes focused slowly on his face. Where am I home? You're home with me, but the dream, the man he was taking me away, and you couldn't stop him. That's not going to happen, Cam said fiercely. How do you know? Ruby's voice broke. How do you know he won't win? And Cam realized he couldn't promise her that. He couldn't guarantee the outcome. All he could offer was truth. I don't know what the judge will decide, he said honestly. But I know this, I will fight for you with everything I have. And no matter what happens, you're not alone. I won't abandon you. Ruby threw her arms around his neck and sobbed. I don't want anyone else. I want you. You're my dad. Cam held her while she cried, his own tears falling into her hair. You're my daughter, he whispered. Always. No matter what any court says. The week before the hearing, Ruby stopped eating. Not completely, but enough to be noticeable. She picked at her food, moving it around her plate without consuming it. Her nightmares intensified, coming multiple times per night. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Ruby, you have to eat, Cam said gently at dinner one night. I'm not hungry. You've barely eaten all day. My stomach hurts. Cam recognized anxiety when he saw it. He'd lived with it himself for 3 years after Elena died. Come here. Ruby climbed into his lap, and Cam wrapped his arms around her small frame. Talk to me. Tell me what's going on in your head. What if the judge picks him? Ruby's voice was tiny. What if I have to go live in that big house with the stranger? Then we'll figure it out. But Ruby, you have a voice too. The judge is going to ask you what you want. But I'm just a kid. What if what I want doesn't matter? Cam's heart broke. It matters. You matter. Everything about you matters. Ruby was quiet for a moment. Then Cam, if I have to go with him, will you forget about me? The question destroyed him. He turned Ruby around so she was facing him, made sure she could see his eyes. Listen to me very carefully. There is no scenario in which I forget about you. If the absolute worst happens and you have to live somewhere else, I will visit you every single time they let me. I will write you letters. I will call. I will never ever stop caring about you. Promise, I promise, on Elena's memory, on Noah's memory, on everything I've ever loved. Ruby buried her face in his shoulder. I'm so scared. Me too, Cam admitted. I'm terrified. But we're scared together, okay? You're not alone in this. That night, around 3 a.m., Cam heard sounds from Ruby's room. Not screaming this time, but quiet crying. He found her packing her purple backpack, the one she'd had that first night. Ruby, what are you doing? She looked up, tears streaming down her face. Getting ready. So when they take me away, I won't make them wait. Cam felt something break inside him. Oh, sweetheart, come here. He sat on the floor, and Ruby crawled into his lap, still clutching the backpack. Remember when you first came here? Cam asked. You didn't trust me. You were ready to run at any second. Ruby nodded against his chest. And now, look at us. You call me Dad. You know I'll keep you safe. You're not packing to run away. You're packing because you're afraid of being taken away. That's different. It means you've learned to trust, to love, to attach. And Ruby, that's everything. That's the whole point. Whether you live here or somewhere else, you've learned that you're worth loving, that you can have a home. But I want my home to be with you, Ruby sobbed. Cam held her tighter. I want that too, more than anything. And we're going to walk into that courtroom, and we're going to fight for it. But what if we lose? Then we don't stop loving each other. Geography doesn't change that. Custody doesn't change that. You're my daughter in my heart, and no judge can take that away. Ruby pulled back to look at him. Really? Really? You're stuck with me loving you forever. A small smile broke through her tears. Forever, forever. Can I sleep in your room tonight? I don't want to be alone. Of course. They made a nest of blankets on Cam's floor. Ruby curled up against him, and Cam wrapped his arm around her protectively. Dad? Ruby whispered into the darkness. Yeah, baby. Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for not walking away. Cam's voice was rough when he answered. Thank you for letting me stay. They fell asleep like that, a broken man and a broken child holding each other together, both terrified of what morning would bring, but determined to face it side by side. The night before the hearing, Derek came over to prep Cam one final time. Be honest, Derek advised. Don't try to be perfect. Admit your limitations, but emphasize your commitment. And Cam, if they ask about Elena and Noah, don't run from it. Your loss is part of what makes you understand Ruby's pain. After Derek left, Cam and Ruby sat on the couch together. Ruby was quiet, withdrawn. What are you thinking about? Cam asked. What I'm going to say tomorrow, if they ask me questions. Just tell the truth. That's all anyone can do. Ruby leaned against him. What if the truth isn't enough? Then the truth isn't enough, Cam said quietly. But we'll still have told it. And we'll still have each other in whatever way we're allowed. Ruby was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that made Cam's breath catch. Grandma Ruth used to say that fear doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love enough to be afraid of losing it. Your grandma was very wise. I'm afraid, Dad. I'm so afraid of losing you. Cam pulled her close, feeling his own fear mirror hers. I'm afraid too. But tomorrow we walk in there holding hands. And whatever happens, we walk out the same way. Ruby nodded against his shoulder. Together, together. Cam confirmed. Always together. That night, for the first time in weeks, Ruby slept through without nightmares. Cam stayed awake watching over her, memorizing her face in the dim light, praying to Elena and Noah and any force in the universe that might be listening. Please, he thought, please let me keep her. Please let us be a family. Morning arrived too quickly, bringing with it the day that would determine the rest of their lives. The morning of the hearing, Cam woke before dawn with his stomach in knots. Ruby was already awake, sitting on her bed in the purple dress they'd bought together for this occasion. Her hair was brushed smooth, and she'd attempted to put it in a braid using the technique Cam had taught her. It was lopsided but earnest. You look beautiful, Cam said from the doorway. I'm scared, Ruby admitted. Me too. But we're going to walk in there with our heads up. We're going to tell the truth. And we're going to show them what family really means. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Neither of them could eat much. Teresa came by to wish them luck, and Cam saw tears in her eyes. You're a good father, Teresa told him. Don't let anyone tell you different. Derek arrived at 8:30 to drive them to the courthouse. Ruby held Cam's hand in the back seat, her grip so tight it almost hurt. The courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all concrete and glass, and the weight of justice. They went through security, then followed signs to family court. The hallway outside the courtroom was busy with lawyers and families and lives being decided. James Reed was already there, impeccably dressed, his lawyer beside him. He nodded politely at Cam. Mr. Brooks. Ruby. He attempted a warm smile at Ruby, but she pressed closer to Cam and looked away. Don't talk to her, Cam said quietly but firmly. Reed's lawyer stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, we're all here for the same reason. No, Cam interrupted. We're not. You're here to win a case. I'm here to keep my daughter. Before Ms. Harrison could respond, Derek put a hand on Cam's arm. Let's wait inside. The courtroom was smaller than Cam expected. Wood paneling, a judge's bench tables for the opposing parties, a section for witnesses. It smelled like old paper and furniture polish, and the anxiety of everyone who'd ever waited for a verdict. Judge Patricia Morales entered, and everyone stood. She was in her mid-50s, Latina, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She took her seat and reviewed the files in front of her. This is case number 4427, Morales versus Reed. Petitions for adoption of Ruby Winters, a minor child. She looked up. I've read both petitions and all supporting documents. This will be a thorough but fair hearing. My only concern is what's best for this child. She gestured to Reed's table. Mr. Reed, your petition was filed first. We'll hear from you. James Reed took the stand, composed and confident. He spoke about his late wife, his desire to honor her memory by providing a child with opportunities. He outlined his financial resources, his 5-bedroom home, his connections to excellent schools and therapists. Ms. Harrison walked him through his qualifications methodically. Mr. Reed, can you describe the environment you would provide for Ruby? A stable, nurturing home, Reed answered smoothly. Private tutors to help her catch up academically after the disruption she's experienced. Access to the best child psychologists to address her trauma. A college fund already established. And your commitment level. Unwavering. I'm semi-retired, so I have flexibility in my schedule. I can be present for school events, appointments, everything a child needs. The testimony went on. Reed painted a picture of stability and resources that Cam couldn't match. But Derek was ready for cross-examination. Mr. Reed, Derek began standing at his table. You mentioned honoring your late wife's memory. Did you and your wife discuss adoption before her passing? Reed hesitated. No, not specifically. So this desire to adopt is new. Since her death, I wouldn't say new, more that her death crystallized it. Derek pulled out documents. You've attempted to adopt 3 times in the past 6 years. Each time you withdrew your petition before completion. Can you explain that Reed shifted uncomfortably? Those situations didn't work out. The children went to other families who were better fits. You withdrew Mr. Reed. You chose to stop pursuing adoption. The timing wasn't right. What makes the timing right now? I'm ready now in a way I wasn't before. Derek let that hang in the air. Or is it that you saw Ruby's story on the news and were moved by the publicity, the idea of being a savior? Reed's jaw tightened. That's not accurate. But you did see her story on the news, yes? And you called child services the very next day. I saw a child in need and wanted to help. Did you consider that Ruby already had someone helping her, that she was bonding with Mr. Brooks? I considered that she deserved the best possible home. Derek sat down, and Cam could see the seed of doubt planted. Next, Vanessa Cole testified as the assigned caseworker. She spoke objectively about both households, noting Cam's limitations and Reed's resources. But she also mentioned something crucial. In my professional opinion, judge both homes could meet Ruby's physical needs. The question is emotional attachment. Ruby has formed a significant bond with Mr. Brooks. Disrupting that bond at this stage could cause additional trauma. Ms. Harrison tried to counter. Isn't it true that children are resilient? That they form new attachments? Children are resilient, Vanessa agreed. But resilience doesn't mean we should repeatedly test it. Ruby has already been through multiple placements. Adding another would be harmful. Then Dr. Sophia Grant took the stand. Her testimony was damning to Reed's case. I've observed Cameron Brooks with Ruby extensively, Dr. Grant said. What I've seen is a textbook example of secure attachment formation. Ruby seeks Cam for comfort. She trusts him with her fears. She's begun to heal in ways that are remarkable given her trauma history. But couldn't she form that attachment with Mr. Reed? Ms. Harrison asked. Possibly, Dr. Grant said. But attachment isn't automatic. It requires consistency, attunement, and time. Ruby is currently in a critical window of healing. Disrupting her primary attachment figure now could undo months of progress. After Dr. Grant came Teresa Abbott, Ruby's teacher, Cam's work supervisor. Each testified to Cam's character, his commitment, the visible changes in Ruby. Finally, Judge Morales said, I'd like to hear from Cameron Brooks. Cam's legs felt unsteady as he took the stand. He'd never been more terrified. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then sat in the chair that suddenly felt like it was under a spotlight. Derek stood. "Mr. Brooks, can you tell the court about the night you found Ruby?" Cam took a breath. "It was Christmas Eve just after midnight. I was heading to work and saw her searching through a dumpster for food. She was 7 years old alone in December weather, eating garbage because the adults who were supposed to care for her had failed." "What did you do?" I stopped. "I couldn't walk away." "Why not?" "Many people would have." Cam's throat tightened. "Because I know what it's like to need someone and have no one show up. When my wife and son died, I felt like I was drowning and no one saw. I couldn't do that to Ruby." "Tell us about your wife and son." Cam's voice went rough. "Elena died during childbirth 3 years ago. Our son Noah died with her. They had their whole lives ahead, and in an hour, it was all gone." "How did that experience prepare you to care for Ruby?" "It didn't," Cam said honestly. "Nothing prepares you for something like this. But it taught me about loss, about grief, about surviving when you don't think you can. And Ruby knows those things too. We understand each other." Derek walked him through the past 2 months. The nightmares, the food hoarding, the small victories. Cam spoke honestly about his mistakes, his learning curve, his limitations. Then Ms. Harrison stood for cross-examination. Her eyes were sharp. "Mr. Brooks, you're a security guard, working night shifts. How do you plan to supervise a child on that schedule?" "I've already spoken to my supervisor about switching to day shifts. It's arranged. What about your income? Can you provide for Ruby's needs?" "We have enough. Maybe not for private schools or tutors, but enough for food, clothes, a safe home. You live in a 2-bedroom apartment. Mr. Reed has a 5-bedroom house with a yard." "A bigger house doesn't make a better home," Cam said quietly. Ms. Harrison changed tactics. "You lost your wife and child 3 years ago. Have you addressed your own trauma? Are you emotionally stable enough to care for a traumatized child?" Cam met her eyes. "I've been in therapy for 2 years. I'm not perfect, I still have hard days, but I show up for Ruby every single day, and I always will. Even if it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what family means." Ms. Harrison sat down, and Cam thought maybe, just maybe, he'd done enough. Then Judge Morales spoke. "I'd like to speak with Ruby. Bring her up, please." Ruby walked to the witness stand, small and brave in her purple dress. She looked at Cam, who gave her an encouraging nod. Judge Morales smiled gently at her. "Hi, Ruby. I'm Judge Morales. I know this is scary, but I just want to ask you a few questions." "Okay." Ruby nodded, her voice tiny. "Okay. Do you understand why we're all here today? To decide where I'm going to live?" "That's right. And I want to know how you feel about that." "Can you tell me?" Ruby took a breath, and Cam watched her gather courage he didn't know she had. "I feel scared," she said, "because I finally found a home, and I don't want to lose it." "Tell me about your home." Ruby's voice grew steadier. "Cam." "Dad, he makes me breakfast, even though he burns it sometimes. He reads me stories every night. He stays with me when I have nightmares, and he never gets mad, even when I wake him up 3 times. He taught me how to braid hair, and we go grocery shopping together, and he lets me pick 3 cereals instead of just the cheap kind." Judge Morales listened intently. "What about Mr. Reed? He can offer you many things. A big house, nice schools." "But I don't know him," Ruby said simply. "And he doesn't know me. He doesn't know that I'm scared of the dark, or that I hoard food sometimes because I'm afraid it'll run out. He doesn't know that Grandma Ruth's favorite color was purple, or that I like dinosaur stories, or that I still have nightmares about not being able to wake her up. Who knows those things Dad does? He knows everything about me because he pays attention. Judge Morales leaned forward. Ruby, what would you say is the most important thing about a home? Ruby thought carefully. Love, she said finally. Not the kind that goes away when things get hard. The kind that stays. And where do you feel that love? Ruby looked directly at Cam, and her next words were clear as bells. With my dad. He chose me, and he keeps choosing me every single day. Judge Morales removed her glasses and set them on the bench. The courtroom held its collective breath. I've been presiding over family court for 15 years, she began. In that time, I've seen hundreds of adoption cases. I've placed children in homes with every advantage, wealth, education, two-parent families, extensive resources. Cam's heart sank. This was it. He was losing. But the judge continued. I've also seen children placed in perfect situations on paper who never thrived. And I've seen children placed in modest circumstances who bloomed beyond all expectations. She picked up Ruby's file. Ruby Winters has been failed repeatedly. By a mother who abandoned her, by a state that bounced her between placements, by adults who saw her as a burden instead of a blessing. Judge Morales looked at Reed. Mr. Reed, I don't question your intentions. Your resources are impressive. You could provide Ruby with material advantages Mr. Brooks cannot match. Reed's lawyer looked confident. However, the judge's voice hardened. I am deeply troubled by your pattern of pursuing and abandoning adoption attempts. 3 times you've started this process. 3 times you've withdrawn. That suggests adoption is more about your needs than about commitment to a child. Reed's face flushed. The judge turned to Cam. Mr. Brooks, your situation is far from ideal. Limited income, 1-parent household, no formal training. On paper, you're exactly the kind of placement I'd usually question. Cam felt Ruby's hand slip into his under the table. But Judge Morales said, her voice softening, I didn't become a family court judge to place children on paper. I became a judge to place children in homes where they'll be loved, protected, and given the chance to heal. She looked directly at Ruby. This child stood before me and told me what she needs. Not a big house or private schools. She needs someone who stays. Someone who knows that love means showing up when it's 3 a.m. and you're exhausted. Someone who sees her not as a project, but as a daughter. The judge's eyes moved to Cam. Mr. Brooks, in 2 months, you have given Ruby what she's been searching for her entire life, a parent who won't leave. Tears were streaming down Cam's face. Judge Morales picked up her gavel. By the power vested in me by this court, I hereby grant the petition for adoption filed by Cameron Brooks. Effective immediately. Cameron Brooks is the legal parent of Ruby Brooks. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder, like finality, like the ending of one story and the beginning of another. Ruby launched herself at Cam, wrapping her arms around his neck. We did it! We won! Cam held her tight, unable to speak through the tears. He looked over Ruby's head and saw Derek grinning, Teresa crying happy tears in the gallery, even Vanessa smiling. James Reed stood and left without a word, his lawyer gathering papers quickly. But Cam barely noticed. His whole world was the small girl in his arms, who was finally legally, permanently his. Judge Morales smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Brooks. Ruby, I wish you both every happiness. Thank you. Cam managed. Thank you. As they left the courtroom, Ruby held Cam's hand on one side and carried her purple jacket on the other. Derek met them in the hallway with papers to sign official documents that made it real. How does it feel to be legally adopted? Derek asked Ruby. Ruby thought about it seriously. The same, but different. Like it's official now that we're family. You were always family, Cam said. This just makes it so no one can take you away. They celebrated that night with their traditional Chinese takeout, this time with Derek, Teresa, and Dr. Grant joining them. Ruby sat at the head of the table, glowing with happiness, wearing her purple jacket over her dress because she wanted both parts of her story represented where she'd been and where she was going. Around midnight, after everyone had left, and Ruby was tucked into bed, Cam stood in her doorway watching her sleep. She looked peaceful in a way she never had those first weeks, her face relaxed. Her hand curled loosely around her stuffed dinosaur. "Good night," Ruby Brooks, Cam whispered. "My daughter." And somewhere in the space between Earth and whatever comes after, Cam felt Elena's presence like a warm blanket. He imagined her smiling, imagined her saying, "I always knew you'd be an amazing father. You just needed the right moment." "Thank you," he whispered to the universe, to Elena, to whatever force had brought Ruby into his life. "Thank you for giving me a second chance at family." The days after the adoption were a blur of happiness and adjustment. Cam had the adoption certificate framed and hung in the living room. Ruby's artwork covered the refrigerator. Their apartment transformed from a place Cam existed into a home where they lived. Ruby still had nightmares, but less frequently. She still hoarded some food, but the stash on her shelf stayed steady instead of growing. She still asked for reassurance that Cam wasn't leaving, but the asking grew further apart. One evening, about a week after the adoption, Ruby presented Cam with something she'd been working on in art therapy. It was a drawing in careful colored pencil, two people holding hands in front of a house with yellow curtains. Flowers in the garden, both figures smiling. At the top, in Ruby's careful letters, "My forever family." But there was something else in the picture. A third figure, smaller, standing beside them with a halo sketched above its head. "Who's that?" Cam asked, though his heart already knew. "That's Noah," Ruby said. I thought maybe he'd want to be part of our family too, even though he's in heaven with Grandma Ruth and Elena." Cam's eyes burned with tears. He pulled Ruby into his lap. "He is part of our family. He always will be. Do you think they're watching us?" "Grandma Ruth and Elena and Noah?" "I hope so," Cam said. "I hope they see how happy we are." Ruby leaned against his chest. "I think they're proud of us, for not giving up. I think so too, baby." They sat like that for a long time, holding each other, thinking about the ghosts who'd shaped them and the future they were building together. Christmas Eve arrived again, bringing with it a full circle moment. Cam and Ruby returned to the spot where everything had changed: the parking lot. The dumpster, the place where a broken man had stopped for a desperate child. Ruby wore a new purple coat, this one warm and well-fitted, a gift from Teresa. She carried 2 cups of hot chocolate steam rising in the cold air. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the dumpster that had been Ruby's restaurant a year ago. "Do you remember what you were wearing?" Cam asked. Ruby smiled. Grandma Ruth's purple jacket and shoes held together with duct tape. "And now look at you. Warm coat, good shoes, full belly." Ruby leaned against him. "I don't remember being scared that night. I mean, I was. I was terrified. But when I think about it now, I mostly remember feeling like I was waiting. Waiting for what? For you. Like somehow I knew someone was coming. Someone who wouldn't walk away." Cam's throat tightened. "I almost didn't stop. I had my hand on my car door, already planning my route to work." "What made you turn around?" Cam looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Maybe Elena. Maybe Grandma Ruth. Maybe both of them working together. "I think they wanted us to find each other," Ruby said softly. "I think you're right." Ruby took a sip of her hot chocolate. "You know what Grandma Ruth used to say?" "What's that?" "That sometimes when we think we're at the end of our story, We're actually at the beginning of the most beautiful chapter we never saw coming. Cam felt tears prick his eyes. Your grandma was very wise. They stood together watching the snow begin to fall, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago they'd been two broken people, a homeless child searching for food, a grieving man searching for purpose. Now they were family whole in their brokenness, healed in their love for each other. "Ready to go home?" Cam asked. Ruby grinned. "Yeah. Our tradition dinner of Chinese takeout awaits. And you promised we could watch that movie where the kid gets left behind." Home Alone is a classic, Cam defended. "It's ridiculous. What kind of parents forget their child? The kind in movies. Real parents remember. Real parents show up. Real parents stay." "Like you," Ruby said, slipping her hand into his. "Like us," Cam corrected. "We stay for each other." As they walked back to the car, Ruby looked back at the dumpster one more time. "Bye," she whispered. "Thanks for being where I needed to be that night." Cam understood. She was saying goodbye to the girl she'd been thanking her for surviving long enough to be found, acknowledging the journey while embracing the destination. That night, as Cam tucked Ruby into bed in her purple-painted room filled with books and artwork and love, she asked the question she sometimes asked when she needed reassurance. "Dad, do you believe in fate?" "I do now," Cam said. Ruby smiled. "Me too. I was meant to search that dumpster that night. You were meant to see me. We were meant to save each other." Cam kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, Ruby Brooks. Sweet dreams, Dad." As Cam turned off the light, leaving only the nightlight's gentle glow, he thought about the past year, about how one moment of choosing to stop instead of walking past had changed everything, about how saving someone else had been exactly what he needed to save himself. He thought about Elena and Noah, about the family he'd lost and the one he'd found. Different but equally precious. Not a replacement, but a continuation of love, an expansion of heart. Sometimes the most beautiful families aren't the ones we're born into, Cam thought. They're the ones we choose in our darkest moments. The ones we build with commitment and patience and love that refuses to quit. Ruby was his daughter, not by blood but by choice. By every morning he made breakfast, and every night he read stories, and every nightmare he sat through without complaining. By grocery shopping trips, and burnt pancakes, and lopsided braids, and showing up even when it was hard. Family, Cam had learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, about staying through the nightmares, and the food hoarding, and the fear. About loving someone, not despite their broken pieces, but including them, honoring them, making space for them to heal. Cam looked at the photo on Ruby's dresser. The one from her adoption day. Both of them grinning, holding the certificate starting there forever. Beside it, Ruby had placed a smaller frame with a picture of Gloria and in a place of honor, the family photo from Cam's wedding with Elena. Past and present living together. All the love that had shaped them honored and remembered. That's the truth that left Cam stunned a year ago and still amazed him every day. Love doesn't replace love. It multiplies. Hearts don't have limited capacity. They expand to hold everyone who matters. He'd found Ruby searching through trash on Christmas Eve, desperate and alone. She'd found him walking through life like a ghost, existing but not living. And together, they'd found home. Friends, if Cam and Ruby's story moved you tonight, let it be more than a moment of feeling. Let it be a reminder of the power we all carry. One decision. One moment of choosing to stop instead of walking past. One act of seeing someone when the world has made them invisible. That's all it took to change two lives forever. Maybe you're Cam right now, moving through your days feeling empty, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. Or maybe you're Ruby searching through the darkness, hoping someone will finally see you, really see you, and choose to stay. Here's what their story teaches us. Love has a way of finding us exactly when we need it most often, in the form we least expect. If this story reminded you that families aren't always the ones we're born into, that sometimes they're the ones we choose in our darkest moments, then share it. Send it to someone who needs hope today. Send it to someone who's forgotten they have the power to change a life. And if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but remind you what it means to be human, to be compassionate, to be brave enough to love when you're terrified, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and share this video. Join our channel where every week we explore these moments when ordinary people make incredible choices. Because somewhere out there right now, someone is standing at their own crossroads, deciding whether to stop or keep walking. Be the person who stops. Be calm. Find your Ruby. Change the story. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're never truly alone when you're brave enough to love.